Now we're going to move on to our next Gavin O'Connor film, and Scott's going to tell us about The Way Back.
Yes, in which Ben Affleck's Jack Cunningham is a just about functional alcoholic, living alone and working in the construction industry, being scraped up off the floor of the local bar and deposited home every night for the cycle to continue. His family are concerned about him, including his separated wife, but Jack's not willing to confront his demons, just attempt to drown him in booze. He's given an unexpected reason to care about life when he's called on to step in to coach his old high school basketball team, which, after some soul searching, he agrees to. Said team, the Bishop Hayes basketball men or something, are not very good and lose a lot and don't work together as a team. And, well, I'm sure you see where things are going with this. While Jack is putting the team on the winning path, reworking their playstyle to suit their strengths and ultimately challenging for the playoffs, it seems that he's also putting his life back on a winning path until past trauma resurfaces and knocks him back on his ass and into a bottle. Perhaps the main deviation from formula in The Way Back is that it's not exactly presenting a simple character redemption arc and a happy ending, as much as the overbearingly schmaltzy ending music would have it. Instead, it's offering the possibility of a happy ending for both Jack and also his team. A lot of the story and a lot of the characters that we'll meet in The Way Back will have some degree of familiarity to anyone who's been watching films for any length of time, but that's not to say that the classics don't continue to work. The kids prove to be a fairly endearing bunch, and while the being whipped into shape sequence isn't winning any originality awards, it's a fun stretch, bookended by a pretty solid performance from Batman as a believably traumatised man incapable of or unwilling to deal with his grief. I don't think I've got a lot more to say about The Way Back other than perhaps to emphasise that I enjoyed it a great deal. Sure, as I've repeatedly mentioned, it is not breaking any moulds, but it's a really solidly put together movie and well worth adding to your shortlist.
Yes, not for the first time, possibly even for the last time in this episode, this is a solid film that I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. It is solid. Mm-hmm. Ben Affleck's pretty engaging in this. It's quite compelling. The characters seem quite believable, quite well drawn and rounded. What I think is unusual about it, and maybe the name honestly leads into that too, because the name suggests sort of a worse starting point than there actually is that it's a sporting redemption story, but there's not really a hell of a lot to redeem. Ben Affleck's character doesn't appear to have, endangered anybody, or hurt anybody, did anything really bad to anybody except himself.
Yeah.
And there's never a point where he's like really bad. He's not, for instance, like Nick Nolte in Warrior, where he's beaten his wife in the past or anything like that. He'd sort of got messed up at one point in his life. His wife helped to get it together. Horrible tragedy happens to them and he kind of falls back. And in a way, I kind of found that refreshing because it's not quite as cliched as it might have been otherwise. It's just that this guy's a bit troubled. He's not a bad person. He deserves some help, but he's got people around him who are willing to give him it, and it's quite compelling, I guess. He's quite a sympathetic but real character.
Yeah. It does a really solid job of making him feel like a real character. There's nothing overly ridiculous that kind of happens to him or happened in his past that would make him seem like he's a particularly special case. I mean, obviously there's tragedy that's happened, but it doesn't feel like it's something that couldn't happen to anyone on a bad day.
Exactly.
And like you say, it's not as much a redemption that he did something particularly bad. It's just kind of making him feel a bit better, and kind of it does a kind of more interesting dive into the character of Cunningham than you might perhaps expect from this kind of thing. It kind of works better as a little kind of character examination rather than specifically the kind of standard sporting underdog story that is kind of tied to. But the two kind of mesh quite well, and it's a very solid and very enjoyable film to watch. Yeah, works pretty well.
I love it's quite subtle as well, and there's one point in particular where I kind of wish it had been slightly more subtle, because there's not really any hint of what had led him to this, and I was always waiting for that to drop.
Yeah.
And then you get to the moment where his ex-wife persuades him to go to this kid's birthday party, and then they mention Michael. He's conspicuous by his absence or not having been mentioned before. It's like, oh, okay, I get that, and I quite liked it. And then they spell it out a couple of times after that, and perhaps that's necessary. I'm not going to take great issue with it, but I kind of like the fact that least to begin with, it was really subtle. I was like, yeah, kind of, I wish they'd leave it like that.
Yeah, yeah.
At least, like, drop the gravestone or the conversation in the car, like, later on when he's in the hospital.
Yeah.
Keep that bit. But I was just slightly frustrated because I thought, I like the films like this should be a bit more subtle.
Yeah.
You know, it's rather than just, like, highlighting it and underlining it, which not quite what it does. But yeah, I just find that vaguely frustrating because otherwise it was being quite subtle and exactly the sort of thing that you can understand would make people, if not begin drinking, relapse like he did. And yeah, it's quite a human film. And it doesn't have like huge extremes or anything in it. There's no, Nick Nolte thinking he's somehow in the cast of Moby Dick moment or anything like that when he falls off the wagon. So yeah, it's solid. It's a reminder. I mean, you and I certainly, Scott, I'm not so sure about Craig, but we've kind of always liked Ben Affleck and have been largely baffled in our time reviewing films with why he's quite so derided by so many people so often.
Yeah.
Ben Affleck's really, he's pretty decent. He can act pretty well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good for that. If there's anything I didn't like, I know it comes as no surprise to me given the character that it is, but when the preacher that had asked him to come back then starts berating him, it's like, you sought him out, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Then we've got a zero tolerance policy to drink, but we're trying to help you by refusing to help him in any way at all. What are you talking about, you bell end? Yeah, other than that, definitely recommend it again. And I don't mean to damn it with faint praise. It's a really solid film. Again, I don't think I'd ever watch this again. Very glad I watched it this one time. It's been on my list for the last year and a half, actually, to watch. Because it sounded interesting when it came out.
Yes, 100%. Do not regret watching it, so well worth a look.